Hello, everyone, and welcome to this ET discussion on how prepared companies are for the post-COVID-19 digital hybrid workspace. Joining me today is a panel from across sectors that has the breadth of experience and the resultant depth of knowledge when it comes to all matters technology. I stress on the variety of sectors on display because the past few months have impacted companies differently. One of the problems that is generally seen in technology broadly and cybersecurity more specifically is the silos that exist. There is an inertia when it comes to sharing knowledge. With this conversation, I hope we can all learn from each other and move the needle forward in matters of technology. Without much ado, let me introduce the panel. We have Sharad Saxena, who was the CTO at Bank of Baroda. We have Jacxine Fernandez, who is the VP and CISO at the Adani Group. Then there is Mr. Kunal Dhingra, who is the head of infrastructure at L&T Infotech. We have Chandan Pani, who is CISO at Mindtree, Mr. Vishal Salvi, who is the CISO at Infosys. And finally, we have Ravindra Kelkar, Area Vice President, Citrix India. Welcome you all to the conversation. I'm going to probe you about the last few months and understand how you as technology leaders are shaping the conversation around the way we have met with the COVID-19 challenge. How are we going to reframe our jobs in the days ahead? Just a couple of small suggestions before we start on how we structure this. I will start with an open question to all the panelists, and then we'll ask specific questions of each of you. Do keep your answers as short as possible. I will begin, I think, by asking that one learning that has guided your decisions as thought leaders in the last few months. I think let's begin with Mr. Kelkar.
Yeah, hi. From learning perspective, there are a couple of things that has happened, right? One is remote work is here to stay, right? That is very clear. And because now number of offices is equivalent to number of employees, because most of them are working from their respective homes, security in that context has become extremely important. The third thing, which is new baseline, is lots of things are moving to public cloud, right? Because in the past, we had the luxury of accessing everything from, sorry, there is background noise. Yeah, in the past we had, most of the things within the corporate network, and users used to come to office accessing, private clouds. But now with folks moving to their respective homes and sudden spurt in the demand, we have started to use public cloud more. And last but not the least, is now hundreds and thousands of offices, which is equivalent to number of employees that I spoke. I think collaboration of employees is going to be very, very important, right? For first 6 to 8 months, when I look at myself, I was very comfortable because for many people I have worked, one-on-one personally. I have seen them, I had met them in person. But now there is 20% of the workforce because of our expansion and of this, attrition are the people that I have not met. So in the context of remote work, last but not least, collaboration is going to be very, very important. Collaboration needs to be more more important than ever before, and associated workflow and things like that. So in a nutshell, remote work is here to say security, third is public cloud, and last but not the least, collaboration. So those are my few learnings. Nemo, back to you.
Right. Mr. Salvi, same question to you. What is that one learning that has guided you as a business leader for the last few months?
Yeah, thank you, Nirmal. And, as a part of this COVID situation and the crisis, there are actually many learnings which are there. But if I had to pick up one, I would say that never allow a crisis to go waste, and use this to look at what are the things that you can do to use this as an opportunity to implement things that you have not been able to do otherwise. So for example, while COVID struck, we were also seeing a big avalanche of cyber threats coming our way. And given the fact that there was higher productivity and tension, given the fact that everybody was fully sitting at home and focused on work, there were a lot of things that people could really focus on and get it implemented. And so, I know a lot of companies, and including us, we could accelerate some of our cybersecurity program because of what was happening externally, but also because of the way we were able to focus during the crisis, right? So,
Right.
so there has been a significant amount of improvement that has been brought in because of that. So that is one thing that I can pick up as a good learning from this, and you would want to use it for future as well.
Absolutely. Mr. Pani?
If I would like to pick one learning from this entire COVID exercise, I would say how to enable people in difficult situations, right? That is the, I think, foremost requirement for us in the entire COVID saga, right? We can talk about security, we can talk about risk, we can talk about so many things. But in this last 12, 13 months, right, what is important for us, how I enable my end user, right? How I enable my productive user to the same capacity which they used to do inside office, considering the same amount, same level of security that we used to provide them within our office perimeter, right? Now, everything is changed, new perimeters, northeast, east and west, your north and south, the entire traffic patterns are changed. The way people are working, the patterns are changed, right? No more so-called ODC or overseas development centers, data center. Literally, I don't have any control on what they are doing at their home, right? The IoT devices, what they're using, they're connected to the same switch where my system is also connected. So the entire world is completely different now, right? So I can go ahead and enable n number of security products, security solutions, but end of the day, I need also to ensure that the end user is panicked. They are facing a different sort of anxiety because of whatever is happening in the market, because of the COVID, because of family members. So we need to ensure that the same level of productivity and security, same time the user convenience also we have to look at. So combining all these three, how to get the maximum out of them is something we try to focus, and we ensure that the security controls, the requirements are aligned as per that. So that is one takeaway from the entire COVID saga for me.
Mr. Dhingra?
Yeah. So my take on last 1 year is IT is no more IT for a company, and no IT department is anymore an IT department. IT has moved away from being an enabler to an essential. Now, the ways of working has completely moved into an assembly line format. IT services plus security plus equipments are just a raw material. Faster you can turn around, box the service and ship it to an employee is what is the need. If you are slower in terms of shipping your services to an employee would move on and somebody else would hire him. Is the biggest learning for this year for me. So now you can't prepare different sizes for all. This is the time to prepare one size fits all.
Fair enough. Mr. Saxena, would you like to give us that one learning that you had in the last few months?
I think one big learning for all of us was the definition of agility and adaptability completely changed. The pace which we used to feel agile working is, or the pace of adaptability has completely changed, and more so for a public sector bank like ours. And for everybody else, pandemic came with such a sudden manner that hardly anybody had time to prepare, and there was no time to think and perfect a solution. So the whole organization had to move on. We had to function, and the banks were in the forefront of the activities when the first lockdown came in. But we had to function, and this was the time, if you remember, 23rd of March, when 31st of March is the financial year end, and we are very important for the whole industry. So we had to roll out solutions with half-baked solutions, half-baked security. Not that I'm saying putting any smaller relevance on security, but we knew that it was not perfect and we would go on improving it. So I think one big learning is that keep rolling on things, keep improving. Agile was not something which we were practicing, but we started practicing. Adaptability was something which we were very, very slow to take off the ground. And that happened. And I'll give you more stories later on, that we were in the midst of one of the biggest amalgamations when this hit us. We had just migrated one branch when we were integrating Vijaya Bank and Dena Bank within Bank of Baroda. And the whole thing came to a grinding halt. There again, we had a quick solutions deployed. We started doing incrementally from 1 branch to 10 branch and so on. And finally, we used this problem as an opportunity, and we turned around and we did it in a lesser time as we envisaged before the pandemic hit us. So I think this is a big learning for us, that which without pandemic also we could have done, but I think pandemic forced us to become more agile and more adaptable.
Right. And Mr. Fernandez, the one learning for you.
Having said that, I don't think there's much I can add to what already the panelists have already concluded. On a lighter note, I did realize that apparently hackers and threat actors are the one breed of human beings that apparently are absolutely not affected by the COVID situation, because rather than going down, they've actually gone up in the activities.
Right. And I think it's great that our panelists are coming in from so many different sectors, because the kind of learning and the variety of learning that we have heard is the result of the variety of experiences that is on display today. Let me ask you a more specific question, Mr. Fernandez. How has IT priorities evolved over the last 14 months from the first wave to the second wave? Do you see any changes in the midst of the second wave?
I think everybody's become a veteran in the second wave. I mean, we've learned painfully so in the first wave, because we rushed to enable business, which was rightfully required at the time. Sometimes there were corners cut. A lot of organizations have, luckily, most of them have gotten away with it. Some of them suffered for it. So I think more or less coming into this second wave, I think most organizations were prepared with what they wanted to do to enable the workforce. Having said that, I think one of the learnings, at least from my side, that I've taken is that whatever we did to enable the operations at the first wave had to consistently evolve as we moved along, because like you correctly mentioned, and Ravindra also mentioned, remote working is a reality. I mean, it's not going to end with the COVID situation. So from that perspective, what we did, even from a cybersecurity perspective, to enable the workforce had to evolve over time. So we started with a particular technology rollout. It could be VPN or something of the sort. Have we evolved from that to something more secure as we move along, so that we know that since this is, like we keep saying, the new reality, have we evolved to make it more and more secure as we go along? Because whatever was there previously was being used, was being abused. Now we have to move to a bit more secure situation.
Right. In this context, I would also like to take a perspective from Mr. Saxena, because he was actually at the helm of a company that was going through a major transformation with the amalgamation of different banks into the fold. What has changed your environment for good?
So I think what has changed is a lot of things which were sort of anathema, touch me not, before COVID came in, have become so readily acceptable. And I think there is in the lighter vein, people say the things which CTOs could not drive, COVID has done it. So there were so many agendas which we are, for example, in a public sector bank, we always wanted to roll out a completely online approval systems for various things which we do internally. and people were not adapting to it. For example, we invested on Microsoft Teams much before COVID came in, and in a very limited way we were using, and I was trying very hard to put it through the organization, and nobody was accepting it, and now nobody can do without it. Same with the internal processes which have completely come online. So things which have become, you are asking, which have changed permanently is the mindset that we can do remotely. There are now interviews happening. There is now procurement happening on using and be mindful that we are governed by all CVC processes and so on and so forth. So we have to be particularly following all those norms. But we have devised ways of following those, not circumventing those, but using all these new techniques. So that's another one. Another change which has happened is the realization of the fact that the brick and mortar model will function to a limited extent in servicing the customers. We have to evolve digital ways of servicing, both from the sales and servicing perspective. We have to enable the customers to reduce the footfall in the branches and enable them to do themselves various services. So these are the changes which we thought would take enormous amount of time, but I think they have happened for good now.
Right. Mr. Salvi, one of the things that fascinate me about the entire thing is client relationships. How have client relationships evolved? What are the security expectations that they have? And how have they evolved over the last 1 year? Because this has been some sort of a major change maker when it comes to the expectations from clients, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that relationship has only deepened and improved because most of the clients, in fact, all of the clients have shown a deep empathy towards what each of the organizations have gone through, because it's not just that they are seeing that their partners are going through a problem, but they are also seeing it themselves, and they can relate to it and they can empathize with it, and so therefore they're very considerate in terms of what kind of responses you should expect from the individuals. Having said that, I think it has differed from industry to industry, and I can only talk about the IT services industry and what we have deeply gone through during this whole exercise. And the IT industry obviously was well prepared because we have been adopting work from home culture for many years. So work from home was not it's just that we had to scale it to a level where we would have 100% of the employees working from home. And that was not while it was a very important task, but it was not a difficult task to do. Like what Sharad was talking about, to encourage people to work on Teams was not there was already a strong adoption of Teams and WebEx and other Zoom because most of our work is a global work, right? So people are you just cannot have that physical intimacy of going and meeting client because you are in different continents and different cities. So that was not an issue. But like I said, the clients had displayed a very deep sense of empathy towards what was happening, and also similar to what Sharad mentioned, I think some of the changes that were forced on us, in terms of being able to allow people to work from home, because that required board approvals for certain clients, and that had to be expedited. There was some contractual obligation which did not allow us to work from home for certain clients, so that has to be renewed, and we had to get those new contracts completed. But all of that I think we could do, and over a period of time, there has been a lot of relaxation and risk acceptance of a working from home model, and so far it's working well. I don't think we have seen any major impact or incident or a breach or a risk which has come because of an extended period of working from home, right?
Right.
I think the future is all about looking at how do we now build a more hybrid model? And we do believe that this is going to be there for an extended period of time because of what we are seeing in the second wave. In fact, just to quickly answer your earlier question on what is different in the second wave as compared to the first, we at least in the IT industry, we never really went back to working in office, in India, and then that's when the second wave hit us. So therefore, actually, nothing much has changed as far as that is concerned. The only thing which is changing is that the human impact of this is far higher as compared to what it was in the wave one, and so there has to be there are personal losses, and the mortality rate is higher, and the number of cases are higher, and that I think will have a some impact in terms of how we are going to get business doing.
Adjacent to the question that I asked Mr. Salvi, Mr. Dhingra, how has the pandemic affected security, and more importantly, the risk posture of companies, and what are the kind of solutions that you are adopting to address the changing needs?
I think the biggest change that this pandemic has got in, and I'll try to put a little bit of a reverb to what I would be answering your question to. In any organization, there are 4 M's that are typically needed to run the business. That is man, machine, money, and method. If I say man and money are your employees and the organization, which is your muscle power, you can put these 4 M's into 4 wheels. And machine and method could be information security and infrastructure. So infra that is provided as a machine, and method is all the guiding principle processes that a information security teams put around. This year, has been a drastic change. Instead of it a 4-wheeler, it has become a 3-wheeler now. The front 2 wheels, which are machine and method, have come very, very close to each other and almost become an overlapping environment for majority of companies. And this is a drastic change. This was never ever expected, that these 2 wheels would come so close to each other that they would just become 2 sides of a coin now. Maybe another, if it gets extended for another 1 year, it would just become 1 side of a coin, that they would come on 1 side. So that's a big change that has happened. And because this change has happened, now the changes that we are seeing, everything has been moving towards a unified environment for security. I think initial part of discussion, we said this is not going anywhere. Everything is moving towards perimeter. Now there is no perimeter even. All the securities have to be built into the last used device itself. Now, which could be OT, or which could be IoT, or which could be your own machine. On top of it, you can't even put it in the last device itself, because that device, if you keep on loading with different security tools, then the other problem comes on the machine, the performance. So you have to do a very, very right balance on what you want to push to an employee, how much security is required. And I'll go back to my first statement, which I made. Now you need to create different t-shirts, and you have to create different colors of t-shirt, not different sizes of t-shirts. So you have to create a security environment for whole of your organization, which earlier specifically for IT, ITES, and Mr. Salvi would agree to this, and Chandan would also agree to this, that for ITES companies, it was very difficult. All our clients wanted a different set of infrastructure, different set of security policies. Now that's ruled out. Everybody is at home. So I can't enforce a policy for ODC 1 or a B policy for ODC 2, and security posture which is maintained differently at different firewalls or different infrastructure or different machines. Now, if an employee has to be enabled, every employee is an employee. Today, I could be working for an X customer, and next day I would be assigned to a Y customer. Everything would move away from number of people to type of skill set. A organization today wants to use an employee on the skill set base than the number of employees. And because everything is dependent on skill set base, so security posture and the type of security that you would implement on the employees' end machines would also move away and would be redesigned thinking the type of work. Instead of XYZ name of a client.
Very interesting. Just wanted to say one more thing. If there is any question that you would like to answer, do feel free to interject and give us your thoughts. My next question is for Mr. Pani. We have seen surveys that reflect a strong positive user sentiment towards an increasing security spend and increasing budgets owing to the increase in the number of cyber threats. How has the investment plans at your end evolved, Mr. Pani?
I think interesting question, Kunal. See, the investment is something which is directly related to the threat landscape that you see in front of you, right? Because of COVID, what happened? The threat landscape was amplified. If you go back and see last 14 months, the number of cyber attacks, it was kind of raining, right? Every industry, specifically the IT industry, were panicked, right? Right at the start of this COVID pandemic, one of the large tier 1 IT organization, they faced something which was kind of unheard of in terms of your cyber attack, right? Now, with all this, there was a panic throughout the industry, right? Are we there? Are we not there? Is this COVID is going to impact us very badly? What about the forces who are working behind the barrier, the dark web? What is their capability? What kind of penetration they have towards the white collar networks, the IT organization, ITS organization, right? As the threat amplified, right, organizations started taking a notice that yes, we need to do something. And that is why if you see considerably the market share for all the security organizations or the security product organizations have significantly gone up, right? Be it your CSPs, be it your any other security products. If you look at even the smallest security player also, they were able to do some kind of traction in their product also, which earlier it was very difficult. So considering that, we are also no different. We are also ITS organization, right? We also stepped up our investment wherever things were required. But we same time, we ensured that whatever we are spending is kind of future proof. Because tomorrow, we don't know whether it is going to be hybrid, whether it is going to be non-hybrid, we are going to come back to office, we're not going to come back to office, right? So whatever we invest at that particular time, whatever decisions we took at that point of time, we ensured that that is future proof. So if tomorrow some model is going to be established, God knows what model is that, whatever, right? So we would like to continue with whatever we have done today, right? With that in mind, we ensured that the security investments were protected, done, and also we see one other thing which is very important was that who are your partners, right? If you would have seen in last 14 months, there were a lot of security product companies also were breached, right? So you need to have the right set of partner, right? You need to have a right set of solution, which is going to augment your capability rather than having multiple solutions, not able to augment together, not able to integrate together, right? So considering all that, yes, we also stepped up our security investment, and we are there in a position now to accelerate from here.
Right. I think Mr. Fernandez wants to give his perspective here.
Thank you, Nirmal. I think from our perspective, I think one of the things that has come out is trying to achieve a fine balance, because just to add to what Mr. Pani said, it's also, while it is a factor of the external threat environment, it is also directly related to the earning capacity of the company as to how much we can actually invest at the end of the day. Now, unfortunately for cybersecurity professionals, we are thrown in a kind of a catch-22 situation that you have the external threats increasing exponentially, and then you have internally the companies not making as much revenue because of the COVID situation. So where do I balance? How much do I spend? And where do I spend it? So it has to be a very, very fine balance, because you can't fix everything, of course. You don't have unlimited resources. But at the same time, trying to identify where it is going to, let's say, result in the biggest bang for the buck is kind of what we're trying to identify. Right. Along with that, one of the other things, like I think we had a conversation on this earlier, was also, the understanding on how we interact with, external parties like or regulators and stuff like that. The onus of compliance is sometimes, at these kind of situations, it becomes a little heavy for organizations, because I'm not saying that we shouldn't be compliant. Absolutely, 100% compliance is required. But when organizations are struggling with where to put money in to address shortfalls, or to the, like Mr. Pani said, the ever expanding threat landscape, having a bunch of other control-based assessments to apply to, when the attackers are not following that book that we are complying to, it's kind of difficult. So I think the investments that organizations had to make was tremendously under pressure because of this. Absolutely, future-proof was one of the criteria that was taken into consideration. But even then, we struggled with putting it where all we felt was necessary. Thanks. Back to you, Nirmal.
Right. I think Mr. Dhingra wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just add one line to what was just spoken. The onus of compliance, and this is one drastic step or big step that we have taken in LTI in last 1 year, and we are even harping on this to become very, very prominent. The onus of compliance is moving away from a CISO of the organization to the last employee today. And that is what we are trying to enforce it to people. Forget about you going through your annual information security training, which is 1 hour training, and you need to answer 20 questions. It will not make you a CISO, or it will not make you a security expert.
Right.
But there may be 5, 10 different criteria which would enforce that your endpoint is compliant,
right,
to the bare minimum security posture. Now, right, because you're at your house and we can't force things, so the onus has been transferred to you. If right, it is not met, then as much CISO and the IT team being liable for this particular breach or non-compliant, you are also liable. That liability word is moving more and more towards the user. And if all of us here can agree to that, this has to be end user who has to be made liable. Same as thinking it is his own house and own house security, putting in more locks is his responsibility. Only then you can win the battle. We can't keep on forcing things anymore. You're not sitting in office that we can.
Right. I now want to get a perspective from both Mr. Kelkar and Mr. Saxena on this. Mr. Saxena, you first. You come from an interesting background where there are structural issues. There are employees who are far-flung, who are from different parts of the country. To actually put this onus on compliance on them, how easy is that? How difficult is that to do that in an industry like yours?
I first of all, I agree with the fact that the onus of compliance lies on every individual, and it's not something which the CISO organization should only be concerned about. Having said that, and that this has been a traditional battle, that it is always taken as an hindrance. And since it is taken as a hindrance, the compliance is always less than what is expected. But I think other than compliance, what we also battle with is the privacy issue. Since we are banking, that is another issue we have to battle with. So we have taken a very conscious call as to what, given the level of compliance and given the level of servicing which we can do from not a branch location, we are very clear that these are the roles which cannot be work from home. And that is why you see the banks are open, the branches are open. There are so many bank-related activities which can only be done at a branch. So we have still not come to a model where we can have a completely, truly like IT, ITES services gentlemen who are there, who can afford to have such long work from homes. It's not possible for us for multiple reasons. As far as to answer your question, the onus of compliance, yes, that is an evolving process, but I think it would take quite a bit of time as compared to an IT industry. In LTI, it would be much more easier, but in a public sector bank, it is very difficult.
Right. Now, Mr. Kelkar, you have an interesting vantage point and a unique vantage point on to perceive how this conversation is evolving across sectors. Over to you, Mr. Kelkar.
Right. I also agree that any best technology can be failed by people, right, employees. But at the same time, what as IT professionals we can do is to really create an architecture, and I'm sure everybody has heard about things like zero trust. So yes, employees should actively participate, but at the same time, with the discussion of gig employees, right, or employees who are not going to be as security conscious or educated, and they might end up doing something by mistake and not necessarily by purpose. I do feel first point to consider, apart from people education and holding them accountable, is zero trust. Second, a lot has been spoken about analytics in general, but analytics with respect to security is very, very important. Okay. Today, with, as I mentioned earlier, with thousands of offices, and not only 4, 5, 6 in India, because number of offices equivalent to number of employees almost. Second is, how are you using security analytics, right, in terms of which desktops, which users are at risk, right? A simple example of a geofencing, right? With Wave 2, it is unlikely that me, Ravindra Kelkar, I'm going to log in from Russia, right? I'm going to Mumbai. How does the security system in the backend help on that? Picking up on what Kunal had said earlier, is that threat vector has increased now. To put it other way around, about 14 months before, for most organizations, life was about managed desktop, company-owned desktop, in company's own network, using company's own wired network, log into a private data center of controlled by IT professionals of the company. It has moved to unmanaged desktops, right? In most cases, BYOD. Companies are going aggressively for BYOD, using network that we don't even know, which is internet. Somebody can be using some Wi-Fi, we cannot control that, and most of the times logging on to public clouds. With that, how are you going to take care of security on SaaS application, as an example, SaaS applications, right? Because anything that you are delivering from your own data center, easy to consider. So the third aspect that I want to put on table is SaaS security. Is that how can you do things like secure browser, really controlled security on SaaS and things like that. Last but not the least, huge focus on application security. Things. Look at somebody, Mr. Saxena's vertical segment. Since you asked about flavor across vertical segments, so increasingly banks are asking, can you give us simple things like cut, copy, paste being not allowed, right? Putting applications in their own bubbles so that applications are not talking to each other. So if one application is compromised, the second application is not compromised, right? Because users are using their own desktops and networks that are not controlled by you. So I do feel, apart from people education and people compliance, host of these aspects, in summary, SASE, next level of zero trust that I spoke about, because networks is from the employees directly to the public cloud, zero trust, analytics, and app security are pretty important things to consider, apart from what we just considered, right?
Right. I want to go back to Mr. Dhingra. I want to understand what are some of the practices that are being put in place in his organization. When it comes to making sure that tech-led interventions are in place to detect issues that may be popping up.
Yeah. So a couple of things which we did as soon as this pandemic hit or lockdown just started. First thing that, and these were already running the long-term program, so the roadmap was already set. It just, I think we spoke initially also that this pandemic helped CTOs to move the traction faster. So we just moved away from a basic antivirus to a EDR. That was the basic first step that we did, saying antiviruses would not work anymore. And then another thing was because of our nature of business, we had to move away and say everything has to be layer 7 protection, which just Ravindra said. You can't think about protection being on the network. Everything became on the layer 7 itself. So all our firewalls were just refreshed, and they were refreshed like quick. You have to do it overnight. That was the kind of challenge that came in, and it was done. We moved away from a non-VPN environment and telling everybody you have to VPN in, guys, because till that time we didn't got our contracts re-signed and re-agreed with the customers. which was one of the point which Mr. Salvi said, that all the majority of contracts were supposed to be rewritten because they didn't allow work from home. The traffic had to be generated from the office only. So we had to enforce a different type of network, which we never thought of. So initially for first maybe 15, 20 days, my team almost worked 24/7 and everything was reconfigured to fit in the use. And that is the need of game today. You have to be agile, but somewhere I agree that plan for future, plan for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but you do not know today what is future.
My next question is to the three of you from Infosys, Mindtree, and L&T Infotech. As an outsider, I look at your companies and the sheer number of people that you're employing. If you were to announce a permanent work from home for your employees, how would, what are the structural changes that would be needed? You can start, Mr. Pani.
See, I think we are talking about few dimensions here, but apart from all this, what we are discussing, if you look at IT or ITS company, there are multiple things that actually happens, right? See, one, if I divide all the risks that we see together are mostly divided into three core groups, okay? One, we are talking about cybersecurity, that everybody is concerned. And we discuss about L7, we discuss about EDR, we spoke about technologies, what is available today and all. But apart from this core piece of cybersecurity, there is another set of risk which is coming out from my delivery, right? End of the day, I manage certain thousands of people who are working on certain contracts, on certain customers' infrastructure, right? On certain kind of technology, your application development, application maintenance, probably some platforms, some applications maintenance, some websites which are critical, right? And there is a contract for everything. All those contracts are written for some purpose, right? Any mistake, any kind of flaw, any kind of security issue, which is not governed, not managed by any one of us, right? That is one of the largest issue that we handle as a CISO in any organization, right? That is something completely unmanaged by us, and we directly we don't have any control on that, right? But that is something which is equally important for any one of us, right? When we talk about security, we talk about risk. That is one aspect of risk that generally a lot of people don't speak about, right? Apart from that, that is another segment, right, which is equally important, is your data privacy piece, right? Now, left, right, center, probably the global regulations are changing, right? You talk about GDPR, you talk about STEMS 2, you talk about probably German Data Protection Act, you talk about Brazil Data Protection Act, you talk about CCPA. So there are a lot of global regulations. They are trying to blend in the security requirement as per their own public convenience, right? And we are serving customers across the globe, right? Knowingly, unknowingly, probably I would not know which of my project are actually serving to a customer, which is then in a particular landscape where a specific law is applicable, right? Now, so there, the regulator risk is quite critical for us to discover and kind of support them in terms of risk, right? Now there are three different core areas which we are handling. Apart from these three core areas, there are some other areas also. So your suppliers are there, your vendors are there, probably your awareness itself is one domain that everybody struggles to ensure that how the message can be driven properly, right? Then apart from all this, COVID is there, COVID related issues are there. So the risk is kind of unlimited, right? Now there are so many things are there today we have to handle. Now, if you handle all this and you go back and try to talk about what is there in future, right? How we are ready for future. I would say nobody has seen future as of now, right? These are all assumptions that we have. See, when we started, probably I'll give you a best example. When I started my core committee for security related discussion just before COVID, we never thought that that team is going to sustain for 1 year or probably 14 months. And today also we are speaking to the same team and same subject, same issues, what we spoke 14 months back, right? So we never thought that this team is going to sustain for 14 months, right? And I'm sure we are going to sustain for 1 more year. So this temporary committee, which was created to discuss certain issues to support the COVID related work, right? That is already 14 months and we are looking probably forward another 6 months, right?
And you would not be allowed to vote in India, dude.
No, that's fine. See, that's why I'll go back a little to the history, right? And you look at history, if you go back and see World War I, immediately it was followed by Spanish flu, right? If you look at Spanish flu and today, probably we are close after 100 years, right? What happened during that time, we are also pretty much close there. Now, immediately after Spanish flu, another 20 years, we saw World War II. Now you collect all that and you figure out what happened in that 30 years. So I'm not taking one specific example. I'm just looking at those 30 years, right? 1920 to 1950. If you look at those 30 years defined the world, what we have today, right? From your rockets to jet engines to probably internet technologies, you speak about anything, right? It all started in that period. Your modern investigation of medicines all started during your Spanish flu only, right? Now, how that is parallel to today? See, today, probably if you take the best example, this vaccines. Now, earlier, the trial period for a vaccine was probably close to 10 years. But today, it is 6 months, right? Not even 6 months. Some of the vaccines are kind of approved less than that, right? So all this fast changing environment, right? What is there for tomorrow? I'm really not sure, right? Because when we started, we thought it is for 1 year. Now we are talking for another 1 year. I think some of us would agree that there's a third wave, which is also there on cards, right? So I'm not sure about that. Now with all this, do we really know that what is going to happen after 2 years, 3 years? See, end of the day, the entire industry, what we work is for human beings, right? So if somebody is panicked, somebody is not ready to come to office, we really can't force them, right? All our assumptions that yes, people will come back, everything is going to be fine, rosy, we can paint the sky in whatever color we want. But end of the day, if you look at people, end of the day, the man is your workforce, right? We can automate up to extent. Beyond that, it is people. So we need to look at how they are going to accept the situation. What is there for us after 3 years? I'm just quoting an example. If somebody says that tomorrow that you can operate your all offices without a centralized AC, it is going to be very difficult. Probably some bits and pockets, yes, we can. But all of our offices are centralized ACs, right? AHUs are there. These things are happening for probably last 30, 40 years. I'm not sure how we're going to stop that, right? So considering all that, I would say the future is moving. We are evolving. We are learning. And as and when things are there, we have to adapt and we have to move on. That's my take on future.
Right. Mr. Salvi, would you like to add to that?
We are actually, when we are talking about getting into a new normal, I think we are talking about a situation where it is going to be a never normal, right? And apart from this work from home scenario, there are many other factors which are impacting today's organizations, right? There is a significant adoption of digital, which is going on, and that is getting rapidly accelerated. There are some fundamental shifts in terms of consumer behavior and patterns. There are some new business models evolving, which are happening at the same time. And in all of this, there are major changes happening, right? For example, there is a rapid movement towards the cloud. There is a extraordinary amount of dispersion of data as well as the endpoints, which are happening where we are talking about anywhere, anytime, any device connectivity. So clearly the technology world and the IT world and the cybersecurity world has done quite well to manage this transition, right? I think if you look at the report card, I think the technology and the cyber world has enabled this change. And had we not been ready to allow this change to happen, the world would have really struggled to conduct business, which is largely enabled by the digital technology that is available today, including this conversation that we're having today, right?
Absolutely.
Now, and I think it's happening in an extremely hyper productive manner, right? We are traveling less. There's more focus time, and there is a hyper activity which is happening in terms of being productive and other things. Of course, there are certain jobs which require physical presence. There are, like for example, physical branches which are dispensing, cash or various basics banking services which need to be where people need to go to, and deliver that service. But there are quite a few number of jobs which can be enabled by working from home, right? Now when you look at in terms of what is the future looking like, I think the future is about getting more and more digital. So around 3 to 4 years back, we started to measure the cybersecurity and the digital business that is being done by the IT services companies. And broadly speaking, most of the companies have now gone at least half of their revenues, or almost half of their revenues as digital. And that number is eventually going to be 100% digital. So that's the transformation that IT services itself is going through, which means that we are going to shed the old service models and the old services and the old way of doing technology, and the new wave of technology adoption is going to happen, right? Now, just because we have adapted and adopted well, it gives us a lot of confidence to look at the future and be open and agile and adaptive to whatever the future will actually bring to us, right? Because remember, if we think about the future and the world as never normal, then we adjust and become more resilient with that, having that mindset of being resilient, right? And I think that is a key change that organizations will adopt to, right? They will start thinking about, so for example, when you're out of this COVID situation, while we had not thought about an event like this happening to your organization, in future, there would be a plan that organization will have to make for a low likely, high impact event, right? For example, climate change could be the next change. And how do you, as an organization, prepare to respond to that? Because remember, if you look at the history of organizations, you will find that there is always a churn between the top organizations over a period of time. And for you to remain relevant for your today's time, you need to constantly, apart from being relevant to your customer, you need to be resilient for the future. Right. So I think purely from a cyber security point of view, the future has to be about being hybrid, has to be about adaptive and agile to the way the threat landscape reacts, and also the business landscape react to us.
Again, I would like to go to Mr. Kelkar because of his vantage point. The pandemic has not only impacted employees in general. IT heads are at the center of so much of this. How have you seen this additional challenge over the last 1 year being handled by IT heads? That's number one. Number two, can automated and proactive support solutions mitigate some of the risks that are at play?
Yeah, so how CIs are adopted to this, one is very clearly, if I can say in Citrix parlance, that I think everybody today agrees, baseline is that work is no more a place you go to, work is what you do, right? Now, as Chandan said, one can debate whether it is going to be 30%, 60%, 90% for some organization, 10%, but remote work is here to stay. Number two aspect which is important is, as apps and data are moving to cloud, we also feel over a period of time security is going to quickly move to cloud. Okay, security is going to quickly move to cloud. And as I said at the start, from an end user perspective, what you asked, two things are going to be very, very important. One is experience and collaboration, because experience and collaboration when they are working from remote places is going to be as important. And as for IT administrators, using analytics so that before users start to complain, come to know that there is a problem with application, or CISOs figure out that something happened with the user because he was not, taken care properly. How do you proactively take care of those, those sorts of security parameters through analytics again? Those are the important points that I would want to call out.
Right. I want to go back to Mr. Fernandez now. I think this was referred to earlier, but from the point of view of a diversified corporate like you, when you have contractors and business partners also connecting to multiple applications, how do you remain in control of the data? What safeguards have you put in place for data governance in this context?
I can speak in general, Nirmal. The thing is that yes, and it's not an area that is overlooked only here in this part of the world. I mean, if anything, the spate of incidents that we kept hearing about, whether it be solar winds and most recently about a password manager and all, this underlines the threat that third parties and the extended supply chain has in every organization. Now, I think the realization has come to corporate India that it is not sufficient for me to be secure. My neighborhood has to be secure. My neighbors have to be secure. Then only I can truly be secure. I cannot live in a neighborhood where there is a robbery at my neighbor's house every day and I'm completely insulated from that deterioration. So I think that that translates well in a cyber world. Now, how do we go about it? I would say baby steps, because I think a lot of organizations, I mean, barring the big ITS companies that we see over here on the panel, I mean, a lot of them are still grappling with that, you know. So going to them and telling them, this is, I think, one of the most basic things that people ask for. What is your ISO 27001 compliance? Can you show me that? Do I have a right to audit this kind of thing? So when these things come out is when sometimes some partners have just started realizing, oh, okay, this is something I need to. If like a lot of organizations, if you outsource your payroll to another company, are they keeping the records of that? How do they make sure that they don't send the wrong payroll to the wrong guy? How do they make sure that they don't leave it open on, you know, the infamous now every time something is available on the cloud, it's the S3 bucket. I mean, I hear people who have no understanding of AWS say, have we left anything on the S3 bucket? You know, we are not on AWS with that. So those kind of things is what comes out, you know. So having the right understanding of what your partners are doing for you and what you can ask them. Because again, this is something I've said, you have every organization like ours has a variety of suppliers. Now the guy who delivers, let's say your distillery bottles, you cannot go and ask him for an ISO 27001. He's not going to give you something like that. So you really need to understand what it is that they give you as a service, what do you give in return back to them, and then set the baseline on what you want them to do for you. Right. The part that comes out, I'm sorry, is, you know, where cloud comes into play, and then there's been a rush, rightfully so, to move to cloud because of all the benefits it can. But truly understanding how we are moving to the cloud, what are we going to get in return from the cloud? They're also a third party to us. They're also a supplier to us. So, you know, walking into a cloud scenario with the assumption that, oh, my data is safe now, don't worry. No, you have to set it up. Those boundaries have to be set up by you. Or you have to agree with the cloud player that you're going to set up the boundary and I'm going to review it. So these are the nuances, let's say, for every third party. It's different, a risk-based approach based on what is it that the crown jewels that you are sharing with them is going to be key to that understanding. Thanks, Nirmal.
Right. As somebody who observes it from the outside, I completely agree with you. When I have conversations with people, there are some things which are quite interesting that come around this. I'll come to Mr. Saxena now. Are IT teams seeing a larger ownership of employee experience at companies like yours? This is traditionally something that is managed by HR, right? I'm wondering if the IT teams are controlling more of the employee experience. Mr. Saxena.
I think this is a very good question, and since it comes at the heel of what was being discussed as of now, up till now, Nirmal, I think I'll make my point. See, we are very working very closely with HR for employee experience, and let me elaborate this. A lot of has been spoken about by previous speakers on the security aspect and all that. I think the human aspect is as much important. What about the screen fatigue which happens? I was just jotting the points as others were speaking. What about team building? There are, in the last 14 months, there are employees who have joined new organizations who have not even gone into the office. Will they come out to be as effective an employee as an employee who joins in the office and gets inducted by meeting the people? What happens to productivity? Productivity is something which, if I may keep aside, let me give you a small example. I'll go back to my example of amalgamation. When we were running amalgamation, we were a large team, the Infosys team, other teams, and the bank team itself. There were multiple partners involved, and which we were working across about 18 to 20 territories every other weekend, where we used to migrate a tranche of about 500 to 900 branches. Now, earlier, all these folks were sitting on a floor or 2 floors at the most and doing this over a weekend from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon, till the time we used to migrate over a weekend a large number of customers and branches. And what used to happen was that somebody will, from his seat, he will get up and shout, "Hey, this is all over now, this is tallying," or whatever. And the person used to say thumbs up, and things used to get done. Now, there is nothing like this. People are sitting at their homes. There is nothing like this happening. First of all that informal things which used to happen, which were just taken for granted, which was completely undocumented, uncharted, completely disappeared. As a result of which, what coordination, collaboration will not happen, only came to know when we started doing our next set of migration after the first branch, which we did in the non-pandemic times. And then we realized that we need an orchestrator for all this. So there was a guy whose only job to simulate this in the digital world, who had a long list of 250 items on an Excel sheet, and meticulously he knew that if this person does this, then I have to confirm from that person that is everything okay or not. While this could be done on a dashboard where everybody can keep filling up, we can put technology there, but a human element to say hi, to say that I have spoken to so and so and so and so, makes a lot of difference. So I think the human aspect gets completely missed out when we talk about remote working. Again, coming back about the user experience, we were very cognizant of this fact that user experience and all the aspects I spoke about, and coupled with the fact that what roles are amenable to be taken to work from home on a semi-permanent, on a permanent basis, we are running pilots now. So we are seeing on all these aspects, and also productivity, whether that gets hampered. So we are working very closely with our HR department hand in hand as to what sort of tools, technologies are going to be available to them to be able to do this. Second point, again, there's a lot of emphasis being given in various discussions I've had internally about productivity. As if the person is sitting in the office, I keep watching over his shoulders to see whether he's productive or not. But when he works from home, I really want to watch him. Now, will that put a big brother watching type of attitude or fear in the mind that even if I go to the loo, my absence is recorded and that will be a problem? That should not be the case. So I think a lot of psychological and human element has to go into when we design such remote working.
That's absolutely important. As somebody who also writes about privacy issues, this is a conversation I've had with multiple vendors who talk to me about the solutions they have to track employees, quote unquote. So this is a conversation that's unbelievably important in this day and age. Coming back to the conversation we were having, Mr. Salvi, there is a general opinion that we as a region, as a country, as a people, were lax in not tightening or planning ahead when the pandemic was on a downward trajectory towards the end of last year. Do you think anything could have been done differently from an organizational point of view to prepare companies for the second wave?
I think as a organization, I think we are we were fully prepared, because the fact is that anyway, as we speak, and even before the second wave hit us, we were almost 100% working from home as far as India is concerned. So really nothing changes, as far as the corporation can do from a point of view of enabling people to be productive and be able to connect to work from home. In fact, every single day we are only getting better in terms of our infrastructure and our support services, right? So that's number one. Number two, as corporates, and I'm sure it is the same case with all my colleagues that are here and all other Indian corporates, I think they have been extremely proactive in terms of watching the situation. The reason that we are still working 100% working from home is because we have not taken any adventurous route of asking people to come to office when we knew that there was a clear and present problem of COVID, which was lurking on us, right? So if at all individuals have moved out and got infected, it is because they have taken this liberty on their personal count and not because of organizations asking them to come and work, right? Especially in ITES companies where there was no need to really, come to work from office. Now, having said that, a lot of ITES companies, and I'm sure it is the case with other Indian companies also, are taking more proactive measures to support our employees during these testing times, right? In terms of, so we have created multiple types with hospitals. We have created and announced a vaccination program much more proactively. And even when I'm working in Mumbai, where we don't have a development center, I could use that program to get myself vaccinated, right? Very seamlessly. So there are isolation centers, there are isolation beds which are being arranged. There are types with hospitals, support for emergency services, 21 days leave, insurance assistance with Medi Assist and other such schemes. So there are a host of services which are being provided by corporates to the employees, so that we can take care of their well-being, right? I think what we are seeing here is in terms of things which are beyond the control of what organizations would have done in terms of supporting the system and the overall mindset of individuals in terms of taking liberties and not sticking to the norms that were required to avoid a second wave, right? Which is beyond the control of a corporate for them to do anything beyond what we have done. So that is what I would say.
I think I meant the question more from the point of view of the technological preparations and if those could have been accelerated.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, we were 100% ready before the first lockdown was issued in the country. So, there was no loss of productivity or loss of business because of IT and cyber not able to provide the backbone for people to work from home. Right. So, and we continue to operate that model. And so, and we are getting better and better every single day in terms of supporting that. So I don't think that there was anyway a challenge in terms of lack of preparedness because of technology.
Right.
To enable work from.
Right. I want to come back to Mr. Pani. Most organizations have evolved some sort of a remote access capability over the last few months. With that being the case, with the second wave hitting now, what would you suggest needs to be done differently? What can be done differently? Should VPNs be opened up to everybody? What are the things that need to be done in this context?
See, this question is kind of I'll say in this way that there's no silver bullet for this particular question, right? Now, it all depends what kind of organization is that, what kind of requirement they have, right? VPN is just one part of the solution. How you connect or how you bring your people back to office, right? Now, there are types of VPNs out there where you can expose certain portion of your organization, not the entire organization. And there are other set of VPNs where you can just dial in and it to a concentrator box. From there you dial out, right? So there are different types of solutions are there, right? And then you have your SSL VPNs where it is seamless. You just go to a browser and you don't have to use any kind of thick agents. You just connect and start working, right? So it all depends what kind of requirement you have, right? Most of the customers, what we see is, if I put it in this way, that a lot of customers are now prefer their own VPN solution, right? 50 to 60% of my projects, what they do is they directly connect to their customers. They don't come to my infrastructure, right? Customer believes that that is the best way of connectivity. They would allow them to directly hit their VPN servers, whatever way they have organized. They have created profiles for them and they manage them directly. All I need to do is I need to hand them a kind of laptop and they're all set. Their environment, their requirement, everything is on the customer side. There's another set of customer who says, okay, you bring them back to your office. From your office, you push them back to us, right? There is another set of requirement where we have to bring in with some sort of VPN connectivity, and then we push them back to customer, right? There is another set where these two are not applicable. They need some files, probably some Excel sheet, something else that they need to work. They really don't need a VPN to dial in, right? So we can use some kind of zero trust solution where they dial into the external solution and come back to our file server, take their files, work, and put it back. So there are different kinds of solution. There's no fixed way, and we can't recommend because this is something, again, a customer requirement. But whatever solutions you design, the core is going to be trust. The core is going to be authentication, how you authenticate your user, how you establish the trust, right? Now, there are terms like, so if you have zero trust, there are micro authentications are available nowadays, 2-factor, 3-factor, there are multiple things are there. But at the end of the day, your authentication, your trust, your micro segmentation, and VPN, this put together, you should have the solution in place. Right.
Wonderful. I'll ask one last question. And this is a question that I expect all of you in the panel to answer, short and snap. What is the one project that you will champion in your organization in the days to come? Mr. Pani.
If any one specific project I would like to take, that would be to create a futuristic threat hunting model for my organization, right? The reason behind that is there's a lot of technological requirement, understanding, forensic capabilities that we need to understand what is coming and how to process them. See, we talk about VPN, we talk about firewall, we talk about systems, authentication, trust, all that, right? All of them are some or other create a lot of logs, a lot of events, a lot of information, right? How you correlate that and take out a meaningful information to understand if something is really wrong, something is trying to do something for you, right? Some dark web agency or some adversaries are trying to penetrate, trying to understand something about the organization. If I can do that first bite of identification, that would be my dream project lead.
Mr. Salvi?
Yeah, so it's very difficult to choose one project because, at any given point of time, we are doing multiple things. As you know, cybersecurity is all about, as strong as your weakest link. So at any point of time, you're strengthening various aspects, whether it is in terms of, improving your monitoring and threat hunting capabilities and threat intelligence capabilities, to building the right culture, to looking at different improvements in terms of controls. But I think one of the things that we are specifically looking at this year is about cyber resiliency, and cyber resiliency in terms of being prepared for a secure cybersecurity event, not just on our side, but also on a third party, whether it's a partner or a customer, and how that impacts your organization and how you respond to that. Similarly, what kind of communications we need to have in place to connect with our stakeholders, and what are the tabletop exercises we need to do so that people are properly trained in case something like that happens and they go in a cool and calm way in terms of remediation. So cyber resiliency is obviously one thing which is unique.
Right. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Nirmal. I think I'll echo a bit of what Mr. Salvi said. It's difficult to choose, but I know the question is intended to put somebody in a spot, so I'll try and take a stab at that. I think a project I would like to lead in the full extent of it would be what Mr. Kelkar mentioned briefly, which is zero trust, but in its entirety. I'm not talking just one aspect of it. I'm talking about everything from public to private access, everything, because we are talking about, validating every device, every user, every session, so all the way through across all the various, whether it's devices, network, everything. So the reason I say this is because unfortunately, cybersecurity is replete with the buzzword of the day in a lot of situations. So in this case, zero trust became a buzzword for almost everybody. So, every product all of a sudden had zero trust, even if it was an antivirus solution or an EDR solution. It's like, tall, dark, and handsome in a matrimonial ad. Everybody's got zero trust now. So unfortunately, when one very veteran leader in the industry actually told me, Jacxine, calling everything zero trust is like sticking DVD player in the cloud and calling it Netflix. It's not the same. So there's a difference. So in its entirety, I would love to lead a project like that, which looks at, complete private and public access through something. Back to you.
Mr. Saxena.
Nirmal, I'm not sure whether you like my answer, but I want to do it in a different manner. Given a choice, I would not run any project at all for next 6 months. And why I say that is we have thrown so much of technology, and what I would want the end users is to sweat the assets, to use the capabilities. And I always refer to that as an Excel sheet syndrome, where we get Excel sheet or Excel as a capability with tons of features, but we use just 10% of that. I think at some point in time we have to pause and see whether the investments we have made are really being put to productive use, and whatever tools and technologies we have put in all these months are really capable, and that is where I would want to take a pause.
Last but not least, Mr. Kelkar.
Yeah, to kind of summarize what the panel spoke about, I think platform for work, platform-centric strategy for work. We spoke about shortcuts that many of us took, and in summary, platform that promises three things: experience. We spoke about people being, important aspect. Their experience is very important. Productivity, choice, because they will decide, how and where they want to work. So choice is going to be important. Last but not the least, for which we met is, really security posture in the new world of work. So that's in a nutshell, I would call, platform-centric approach for new world of work.
I think one thing that stood out from the discussion today is the sheer variety of learnings that is there, because the experiences are so unique from each sectors and how much there is to actually learn from each other. Wonderful. On that note, I would like to bring this conversation to a close. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, Mr. Fernandez, Mr. Saxena, Mr. Pani, Mr. Salvi, Mr. Kelkar, and Mr. Dhingra. Hope our viewers have learned valuable lessons from all that you've said, and we can all move towards a more secure environment. Thank you so much, and stay safe.